framework. So without further ado, we can just go on ahead and get started. So what was said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm actually going to put in the chat. I have a couple links for those who are not familiar with CoI and UDL. So I'm going to share those if I can find, there we go, the chat button. So let me share these resources. And you can just, I put them in the chat, but you can click on those and click through while I'm kind of presenting. And let's get started. So just kind of covering what we'll be talking about today. So we're going to do a quick overview of Universal Design for Learning and then a community of inquiry review of that framework. I'm going to cover some of the goals of both frameworks and then kind of my vision on how those can be combined and some of the combined strategies. And then the end of the session, I really just want to open it up to be discussion where you guys can ask me questions, kind of keep it a little bit informal. So feel free to shoot questions in the chat as I go through. I'll stop a couple places and then we can just talk about everything at hand. So great. So just some questions to keep in mind as we go through, just kind of help guide us is the first one is, can UDL and CoI work together to create a framework for developing both diverse communities of learners and online environments? Do the goals of each framework individually support a meaningful blending of support for online environments? And then can these strategies from each framework be grouped together to create like a hybrid model to help guide online instructors? So as we start out, the Universal Design for Learning framework is used to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people based on scientific insights into how humans learn. UDL was created by CAST, which is a nonprofit organization, a nonprofit educational research and development organization focusing on making learning more inclusive. And as we will go through, presented as guidelines, UDL provides designers and instructors with a tool in the form of an organizer that's used to implement the framework. These guidelines in the framework are helped to guide instructional goals, assessments, methods, and materials to help all individuals learn. And then overall, UDL believes that when it comes to learning, variability and choice is the rule, not the exception. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but it's really kind of like accessibility in terms of if you help reduce barriers for learning, it's meaningful for all the students. So you're not just specifically focusing on one subset of individuals, you're changing everything to help all students. And so as we look at this a little bit deeper, the UDL framework uses 3 neurological networks to kind of define principles to help improve teaching and learning practices. Again, to help give all students equal access opportunities to succeed in the classroom. And so those neurological networks are the affective network, which asks why, the recognition network, that is kind of the what of learning, and then the strategic network that focuses on how. And so when we look at these a little deeper, the why really involves the affective network that regulates students' attitudes and feelings about incoming information, as well as their motivation to engage in specific activities, looking at why students want to learn and engage. The what looks at the recognition network and deals with incoming stimuli and what students can learn. And then how involves the strategic network and how students process the information. And that can be really individualized based on their prior experiences and their background knowledge. So based on the what, the why, and the how, and their corresponding networks, 3 principles emerged: engagement, representation, and then action and expression. And so when you dig deeper into each one of those, engagement essentially means to tap into learners' interest, offer appropriate challenges, increase motivation. The principle recognizes that some learners might like to work alone, others like to work in groups. In reality, there's not one means of engagement that's going to be optimal for all of your learners in all contexts. So therefore, it's really crucial that we provide multiple options for engagement. Representation means to give learners various ways of acquiring information and knowledge. This principle really looks at addressing that learners intake information differently, and how they perceive it and comprehend it and how it's presented to them. Again, the idea of variability, increasing choice. And then action and expression provides learners with alternatives for demonstrating what they know. So this principle recognizes that some may be able to express themselves well in like written text, and others prefer maybe a video, and so vice versa, all those different types of elements. So that's kind of the high level overview of UDL. Next, we're going to talk about CoI. And so CoI was created by Garrison, Anderson, and Archer in 2000, and it's essentially the community of inquiry framework. It helps to develop educational communities of inquiry, which is a group of individuals who collaboratively engage in purposeful and critical reflection and discourse to construct personal meaning and confirm mutual understanding of a course topic. And so, as you can see on the right-hand side, the image there, the 3 interdependent elements, social, cognitive, and teaching presence, all work together to create a meaningful educational experience specific to online environments. And so while the full definitions are on the slide there, in short, social presence is the ability for learners to portray themselves as a real person. It's the ability to assert one's beliefs, feelings, and personality through an online context. And this is done when learners and instructors are able to collaborate and engage with one another and create that environment that really allows for risk-free expression. So being able to having an open environment that's respectful of all students' backgrounds. And as we move to teaching presence, that's going to be the ability to design, facilitate, and direct both of the social and the cognitive presences to provide learners with opportunities to achieve learning outcomes. And so this is done in a number of ways, but kind of the overarching is when it's really heavily involved by the instructor. So the instructor is going to be the one that sets the curriculum, that helps focus and narrow those online discussions, and providing individualized support and feedback as needed. And then lastly, cognitive presence is the ability for learners to construct meaning through a combination of individual experiences and reflections. Learners are able to do this through exchanging information, applying new ideas from the content that's being presented, and then coming together to connect those ideas. And so one of the questions that I had posed earlier was, do the goals of each of these frameworks individually support a meaningful, blended, supportive online learning environment? And so individually, both frameworks use principles to create meaningful environments and activities, promoting meaningful student learning. As a theoretical framework, the community of inquiry has some evidence-based practices based on research studies that show how to create these online environments for students. Specifically, at the core of a community, it's again that group of individuals who collaboratively engage in discussions and reflections to construct those meanings. And so I think as I've done research on this, I think there's a good place for it to kind of combine those two frameworks, because UDL helps to provide opportunities where all learners can engage in rigorous, meaningful learning. So while not explicitly the same, both frameworks look to provide opportunities to students where they can develop this shared and individualized understanding of course content and meaning, and engage in those conversations with their peers. So I think this is a good stopping point to just see if anyone had any questions before we kind of move on to kind of how I envision the blending. So if you wrote something in the chat, or if you want to just pop your video up, we can have a couple minutes to have some conversation on that.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but I can start out by clarifying that before you joined us, Holly, we were thinking the COI in the title of the presentation was actually COL.
Oh.
And so community of inquiry is what we're talking about for those who missed that part of Holly's presentation. We had about 15 people join since that part. Yeah, so you are able to unmute yourselves, and we can take one or two questions if you'd like to unmute and ask Holly a question or start a conversation directly.
I was going to say, and if not, I can just keep on rolling. Okay. I think we'll just keep going then.
Yeah, again, whatever works.
Yeah. Feel free to put questions in the chat or wait till the end. That's fine as well. So the next kind of portion of my presentation is the idea of combining these. And so again, while it's not a perfect fit, I wanted to show here, you can see how closely UDL and CoI, which is Community of Inquiry, are already aligned to create online experiences, which applies to a diverse audience. And so I just wanted to walk through. We'll look at engagement at the top. For timing, we won't go through everything. We'll go through it in detail later. But if you're looking at the engagement, which is the green bar at top, you can see I've aligned all three COI presences, which again are teaching, social, and cognitive, into kind of the idea of why students are learning something. So first you can see the course design and course curriculum. Before the course starts, as the instructor, you need to communicate with your students why this is important, right? Why are students coming in to learn about a particular topic? Why are you guys here listening to me? You want to learn something. So developing that why and then applying it into the course curriculum. This really helps in terms of objectives, your assignments, making sure everything's aligned. Then if you move to social presence, you can see that engagement with the participants is really important. And so again, you can do this in the discussions for one point, helping to explain to students why you're talking about certain topics or why this is important, linking their background or their experiences into the conversation. So that's a great kind of clear path, and seeing both how engagement and social presence kind of link. And then lastly, you can help your learners engage with the information to help push their critical thinking and practical inquiry by exchanging information. And so again, this can be done in a number of ways. Discussions to help students think about different perspectives. So how I think about a course topic may be completely different than how someone else may do it. And so when you're exposed to a range of those different perspectives, the students, learners can really come back and understand and comprehend topics just from a different point of view. And so next, I'm going to kind of talk about each one of these in detail. So again, the engagement. So there's a nice connection between COI and UDL. And specifically looking at engagement with the UDL, it looks to help motivate learners in a variety of ways, including but not limited to providing learner choice and voice, providing clear purpose goals for the assignments and activities, helping learners to become independent, self-directed. And so sometimes this is easier to see if we show how it's actually implemented. So that's actually what I'm going to do on the next few slides. So these are some real world examples of what's being done in classrooms that consider both UDL and COI best evidence-based practices. So the first image, which is the blue, which is the upper left-hand side, This is 2 discussion boards. And so they're set up as what's called a casual conversation. And then the other one is an open forum. And essentially these are optional discussion boards where students and instructors can interact informally and share their interests. It can be course topics, it can be something that's maybe related to the course but isn't being discussed. And so this just really allows students to develop that social presence. They're being able to communicate in a different outside of course requirements. It also allows students to share their own beliefs on the topic, going back to that range of different perspectives that learners can experience in these classrooms. The yellow highlighted example shows how the instructor can determine interest and purpose among learners. So in this course, they actually used a survey in week 1 where students share their current understanding on a course topic, why they want to learn, why they joined the course, what they're looking for specifically. And then this helps the instructor at an early stage of the course determine, okay, my students have experience in this topic. So maybe we can decrease a little bit of the focus and we can spend it more on this because that's really where their interest lies. And then lastly, the green highlighted example shows a way to provide course topics to a range of students who have different interests. So for this course, the instructor always has 1 or 2 readings that is required by the class as a whole. But then based on a survey, she found that there were kind of essentially 3 different groups of learners in her class. So there were those interested in becoming teachers, so like the K through 12 environment, those who wanted to become in higher education, and then corporate. And so based on those audiences, she then tailors readings to the student interest. And so I think these are just some really good examples of how this works and how it applies both CoI and UDL principles. And so as we look at the concept of representation, which is that purple bar from UDL, again, all 3 presences align with this concept of what you are learning. So teaching presence, you're sharing personal meanings that come out of the discussions and the assignments, and this can help explain why. So for example, I'm an instructional designer. If I was teaching a course on instructional design, I could say, I use this in my own practice. And so by sharing my own understanding, that can then help your learners understand what is important about the topic that's being taught. And then next, in terms of social presence, you want to, again, create an environment where students feel open to discuss those topics in a variety of ways. And lastly, you want to ask students to be able to apply new information. And when you look at representation, again, this can be done in a number of ways according to UDL. It's providing options, increasing or activating prior knowledge, thinking about how students organize information, and then different ways to get that. So once they have it, like if they watch a video, how do they internalize it? Do they use an organizer? Do they take notes? But leaving that option available to the learners. And so again, here's 2 examples of how this is being done. So on the left in the yellow box is a great way of kind of showing how information can be presented in different ways. So this instructor has, as you can see, a text overview. It then has a video. The video obviously has captions and a script. So maybe someone doesn't want to watch a video, but they want to read about it. So you have the script there as well. Again, text. And then there's 2 different kind of visual aids. And one is a PDF document and the other one is a interactive click through through Adobe Presenter. And again, that's just one example of how you can present information in a wide variety of ways. And then on the right-hand side in purple, it kind of looks, it shows how discussions can be intentionally used to design students to help comprehend course topics. And so this course focused on the role of motivation in instructional design. So as such, this introduction assignment asked students to reflect on why and how they are motivated, what worked for them in the past, when they weren't motivated, why, how would they design for motivation? And so again, this just helps to activate their prior knowledge, their experience on the topic, And then you can start to align everything with the objectives and the weekly goals based on that. And so then the last concept of UDL is action and expression. And this is when you explain the how of learning. And so again, as we look at the CoI presences, teaching presence, you can help focus your discussion on to help students stay on track, supporting them, guiding them to make those connections and take away of the conversations. Social presence, again, encouraging collaboration. So when you have different communication methods, emails, announcements, office hours, it provides students with a range of opportunities to collaborate. I know sometimes during office hours, it's a real-time discussion versus like an online discussion. And so just having a variety of ways to have students collaborate together, group work, individual work, discussions, activities, all of these range of activities. And then the last, when the instructor is looking to help students connect ideas in their own understanding, but making sure you're providing choices in how students are expressing that they know something. And so when we look at the UDL concepts, that's scaffolding and supports for learners. Are you providing a range of different ways? Are you presenting the information the same every week after week? The idea of choice, options, how are students self-directing their own understanding? Are they taking charge of their learning? And then UDL actually has options in terms of physical action. So in the online environment, this is going to be how the course is set up. Are students able to navigate it clearly? Does that make sense? And so when we look at examples, so I have 3 that I'm going to show you. The first 2 on the purple, in the purple box, is actually a final project where the instructor has set up 3 different ways so that the students can demonstrate. So the first one is a final academic paper. And so it's more research based. So if your students are looking to go into a master's program or into a doctoral program or be in a more academic type environment, they can practice those skills and leverage their prior experience on that. The second option is a job aid. And so this is more application based, where if a student wants to take their information and apply it to the jobs, they can do that there. And then the last one, again, is doing a formal lesson plan. And so again, application based. And then the right-hand side is concluding thoughts on an online course discussion. So helping to create and show learners how they connect their ideas. And then the last one is, this is an example of a course where the instructor has provided multiple scaffolds. So there's visual aids, there's PowerPoints, there's branching activities, there's text. And so due to confidentiality, I can't show you some of the details of that, but it helps to see a variety of scaffolds. Another course then also has students upload videos or visuals to the discussion to demonstrate how they want to talk about a particular topic. And so lastly, the question I asked earlier was, can these strategies from each framework kind of be grouped together to create a hybrid model to guide online instructors? And so I think we have just about 20 some minutes left. I'm going to kind of quickly go through these and then we'll leave time open to discuss at the end. So let's see here. All right. So when we look at UDL and how this may look when I say kind of put all these strategies together. So UDL has guidelines and checkpoints for each of the 3 principles. And so the framework is organized in 3 rows that indicate the guidelines or ways to access, build, or develop and internalize the information so learners can then comprehend and self-regulate. So as you can see from the image, all the green, all the purple, all the blue, those are all the principles. And then the rows are how you can then, those are the guidelines. So if you look here, and I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but for the example we'll use, we're going to look at recruiting interest. So Engagement's the principle. Recruiting interest is then the guideline within the engagement principle. And so when you use the organizer, you can see here in recruiting interest, there's then 3 checkpoints that instructors can use to help make sure that when they're recruiting interest into their students, here's how you can do it. And all of this information is on that UDL link that I provided at the beginning. And so when we look at this, you may be asking, okay, cool. So what? UDL has this graphic organizer that helps instructors learn about each principle and the guideline and checkpoint. The so what that I would argue is that specifically on UDL, that it's not meant to be a prescriptive type setting for instructors to use. It's supposed to be a set of suggestions that instructors can then take and apply it to their classrooms to help reduce barriers and maximize learning opportunities. And when you think of that in comparison to community of inquiry, Garrison and Vaughn provided a set of principles grounded in CoI that help shape and direct the inquiry process. But interesting enough, both UDL and CoI do not have like a comprehensive list where, like, if you're an instructor, especially someone new to online learning, hearing all this, that's great, but how do you do it? So my argument here in this presentation is I think that we need more guidance in how this can be done. And so I'm going to show you kind of my thought process. And so early in 2000, I published an article that had looked at all CoI articles and all the different research strategies that were being used. Because if you're familiar with community of inquiry, you'll have one study that focuses on teaching presence and they'll test out this one strategy. You'll have another article that looks at, cognitive and, here are the things that they did in the study. Did they work? Did they not work? And so in my paper, which I shared with you guys at the beginning, I have a comprehensive list of specific strategies that instructors can use. And so I think if we did something like this and kind of aligned it with UDL, I think we can create something that's really meaningful to online instructors. And so as I mentioned earlier, Garrison and Vaughn created these community of inquiry design principles. And so I think that we can kind of align these together. I'm going to click through a little bit. I'll share these slides with everybody, but I just kind of wanted to see or show you guys what I'm kind of thinking. And so we can do this in one of 2 ways. So here would be using the CoI design principle, how we could look at teaching presence, cognitive presence, social presence, and have a list of strategies. And then in blue, the blue text is actually UDL guidelines, checkpoints that tie in to this format. And so if you're an instructor and you're trying to create a classroom where you have open communication and trust, here's how you can do that. And then if you're someone who focuses more heavily or maybe are more familiar with UDL, we can kind of do the same thing and flip it where we have the graphic organizer from UDL and then add in. So at the bottom here of optimize individual choice and autonomy, it gives you, provide learners with as much discretion and autonomy as possible. Well, what does that look like? And so down at the bottom, we can give those specific examples for instructors to think about, oh, okay, it looks like this, or, oh, this is how it can be done. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for doing. And so at this point, I really just wanted to open it up to see if this is something that you guys are interested in. If you don't see it working, it's kind of something I haven't published, I haven't thought of. As I've done research in both, I really do see an overlap. And so, yeah, at this point, I just want to open it up.
Wonderful, Holly, thank you. So you're curious whether or not the combination of the community of inquiry and UDL specific application methods would be of interest for others to see published?
Yeah. So like for me, like this is like really, neat. I'm like, oh, this is great. I think people will use it. And so I'm always like, I like to share my ideas, but it's one of those things like, especially with a group like this, is it beneficial? Do you see benefit of it? that's kind of where I'm at. And so I think there was some comments.
Yeah, there are. So Rebecca Yost is saying this is great. The overlap has been noticeable if you work with these frameworks, but the graphic organizer idea you mentioned is fantastic. And I agree, especially as someone who works as an e-learning developer and designer. And I think sharing actionable items that instructors specifically can design into courses or add to courses is a wonderful way to do it. I think the community of inquiry is something that takes practice.
Right.
UDL has a little more specificity to it. Is there anything you can add to that as far as practice, how to design courses that have a shelf life that's longer than one term or one delivery, while also meeting these critical pedagogy moments?
So I think, at least in my experience, so I've worked with a lot of K through 12 teachers, and I found, especially with everything going on with COVID, they were like, we used UDL to design our courses and it was great, but I'm lacking that community, or I'm lacking how to do that. And so one of the things is, I am a big believer in, if you upload a video, it doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't, showing that you're a real person trying. And so when you're talking about shelf life too, you just want to build these courses in where you're not using specific dates or things like that, where then it can be used over and over again. But I think if you have, with like community inquiry, a lot of those things, there's little things that you can do that make a world of difference. And one thing is like using students' names. So when you're giving feedback, using their name throughout, when you're talking to them, on the discussion board, saying like, Holly did a great point, or Holly brought up something here that maybe Laura would be interested in, or Henry, or whoever. And so there's definitely connections. But again, it's one of those things that if you don't see them, or like to hear this big, framework or this big thing, I think it just really helps to give specific strategies on how that can be done, especially if you're new and you don't know what UDL is and you don't know what COI is and what the goals are. So I think it's just one of those things where it's baby steps, right? Introducing instructors, and then you can kind of build it up from there.
Right. Yeah. And we have some other questions coming in. So among the many frameworks, Henry is asking, why did you choose UDL and COI?
So I'm really interested in community of inquiry. So that's kind of just where my heart is. I've kind of always been drawn to that. But what I found is, I teach for an online master's program, and what I found is a lot of practicing K through 12 instructors, or even practicing higher ed instructors, are more familiar with UDL. They may know what COI is, but then when in discussions with them, they're talking about, they want to bring students together and build this community, but I just don't know how to do it. And so I think those were just two of the big frameworks I kept hearing over and over again that I felt like really needed to be combined. And that's kind of it's just based on conversations, based on people, and people know UDL and people know of COI, but how that actually how they work together, I think, is something that's new. So.
Right. Yeah. And then, go ahead.
Can I ask a quick question? Hi, Holly. It's nice to meet you. I actually was able to read your previous article, so I'm really excited to see that. And then I just discovered your article with Kohler and other colleagues. A quick question for you, because I really liked the way that you had taken the activities to be able to put them into the COI framework to make it more maybe actionable is a word that I like. And I'm curious though, how I'm recognizing in my research for COI kind of that overlap, right? Because of all the three, and I mean, Garrison and Archer, they all recognized that overlap anyway. But how are you going to be able to address the overlap with the activities that when you're in your research and you're culling that, you're curating those ideas, how can you address it or represent it in a clear way? How have you thought about that? Thank you.
So I think one of the big things is, like, especially when you're looking at these strategies, is it's very rare that you're going to find one strategy that meets specifically one thing. There's overlap between all of the strategies. So like, if you're familiar with my paper, I have the same thing listed, like intro discussions. It's listed probably 5 times in that paper because there's such a big overlap and it meets all these things. And so I think it's just one of those things, at least for me, if I'm communicating it, it goes to show you how effective the strategies are, that they are able to overlap. And so I think that's how I would articulate it, that I don't know of any one strategy I would think just fits into social presence or just fits into cognitive, or even with UDL, if you're giving choices to your students, that fits in like ding, 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 like 12 different checkpoints of UDL, right? So I would actually argue that there's probably not many that are going to just meet one of those things.
That sounds a little like a matrix approach almost then, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So along those lines, Brad has asked in the chat, have you looked into Quality Matters and how it might overlap as well?
Yes. So Quality Matters, I am Quality Matters certified, and I'm going to try to answer this strategically. So I think Quality Matters does a great job of setting up a course shell. So of having everything aligned, having everything meet together. I think I have an issue with Quality Matters because I like it to be better. And so something might meet a Quality Matters checklist. It might meet all the criteria, but then I'm like, we can do this better. There's so many things that the course can be set up great, but then if you have an instructor who isn't interacting with the students, or if you have an instructor who isn't doing those things, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good course just because it meets the Quality Matters rubric, if that makes sense. And so I agree with everything Quality Matters discusses in terms of the course design and upfront, that thinking process. But I feel like you just lose out on so much quality and content when the course goes live. Yeah, so I think someone said it's a baseline. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's also a good first step, in my opinion. If you're brand new to course design, or you're brand new to considering what a good course looks like in the online environment, QM and going through the QM rubric is very specific and concrete. But as soon as you get into that more community of inquiry, I want more collaboration. I want the students to be in charge of their own learning.
Right.
QM doesn't offer measurement for that. So
yeah, and I think that's always one of the things, is because I don't want to say that I don't like QM, because I do. I think it's such a great, like you said, a first step, especially if you're brand new to developing online courses. I think just when you've been in the weeds so much, you've been teaching online courses, developing online courses, you know that there's more that has to be done. And so I like you said, it's a great first step, but then I always need more. So
I have a few people asking whether or not the slides will be something that are shared. And I think part of it, I know for me, I would love to be able to look at those example slides a little more closely.
Yeah.
And something that came up when I was looking at those is I'm thinking, okay, I've tried this, right? As a course designer, as an e-learning designer, and then you get feedback from the students that they're just confused. They are overwhelmed by the number of choices they have. The instructions are confusing. They're not sure if they're doing it right. So do you have any recommendations along those lines of how to introduce this style of course design, and then also how to provide instructions and support to the students so they're not panicking and spending time panicking about how to do the assignment or the activity, and more spending time doing the actual activity?
Yeah, so I think, and I shared those slides with everybody in the chat. So I think it's just, again, as the instructor, being really open and honest and explaining with them, saying, hey, we're going to be trying something new, or here's what I'm looking for. And so I think a lot of times we forget that students are real people too on the other side. And so I think it's just making sure that we're having those communications with everybody. I need to share the, let me fix my link real fast.
Anyone else? You do have the opportunity to unmute and ask Holly directly.
Yeah, I have a question. My name is Mindy. Thanks for all of this work. This is really inspiring to me to see, like, because I think as instructional designers, as we design these courses, this is all just kind of going around our heads, right? Like we have all these ideas, and it's nice to see them in this organized like this with the COI and the UDL especially. That's going to be very helpful for me. So thank you for putting that kind of effort and thought into this. I really appreciate it. And I do think you should keep moving forward with this idea. It will be very helpful to all of us who do very practical kind of work. My question is, I know you're focusing on online here, going back into next year, into the fall and everything. We're going to be confronting coming back face to face with a bunch of great online material that people have made over the past year, and trying to reconcile those two things with faculty in a different kind of well, hopefully different kinds of teaching modalities than we've done before. What are your thoughts on that for this framework and being able to put it together into not just an online situation?
And that's a great question, especially the concept that all these instructors have built, all these pieces now that are online. And, that is a concern that some of the faculty are saying, like, I just spent months developing this and now we're going to go back to face-to-face, what happens? And so I think one of the benefits of it is you can always add some of those pieces in terms of like the choice and the resources and the scaffolding. All of that can be housed online still, where the students are able to reference it, but then maybe you come back in the classroom and you have those conversations. So maybe some of the pieces that have to do with discussion, like online discussion specifically, it just needs to be tweaked to how is that done in a face-to-face environment now. So you're still asking you those questions just in the classroom. And so I think it's just going to be one of those things where each classroom is going to be a little bit different. Some classrooms are going to be, blended or hybrid. Some are going to go back to full-time face-to-face. And, there's some programs now that are like, oh, we have everything online and we can reach a broader audience, So I think it's just going to be something that is tweaked. Each content area is going to be a little bit different. And so, but I think those are some valid concerns.
Right, thanks.
We have about 2 minutes left. Holly, if you want to do any summarizing statements.
No, I just really want to thank you guys for listening and providing your feedback. Like I said, it's something that's kind of just been interesting to me. And I always appreciate when we're able to have these conversations and learn from each other. So I really do appreciate it. But yeah, that is all I have. I shared the slides with you guys.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, if anyone has follow-up questions, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yep, I'm putting my email in the chat, and it's on the slides as well, but feel free to shoot me an email. I'm always happy to talk or just explore or meet face-to-face and troubleshoot. Love to do it all. So
yeah. Well, thank you everyone for your patience. For those of you who were here at the beginning, Holly had some technical issues. We're so grateful you stuck around. And for those who joined later, doesn't matter. We recorded and it will be available later through the ELCC. I don't remember all the acronyms. I apologize, but you'll get an email about the recordings later. So without further ado, I'll repaste the evaluation form link into the chat. And one final thank you for Holly. Thank you so much for being here and providing your wonderful work and insights.
Hey, no problem. And I apologize again, but thank you all for staying. So have a great day.
You too.